Minecraft's weapons are pretty good. They're functional for what they're worth, and hey, maybe after grinding for hours, you can get a dark gray sword instead of a light gray sword. Yeah, I'm not satisfied. So in this video, I'm going to create the most insane Minecraft weapons I could think of. And after I make each weapon, I'll even have a professional mod developer rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. But to make things interesting, I'm not just going to handpick what I want to add to the game. Trust me, you would not want that. Instead, I would leave it to fate and have my trusty wishing well decide for me. After making a wish using a gold nugget, the well would provide me with 3 items. They would specify the weapon type, the weapon theme, and the weapon's ability. So upon making my first wish, I received my first items. We've got an axe in the theme of steampunk with the ability of lightning. That's actually pretty good. I'll take that as a start. Let's see what I can come up with. So for my first model, I started the general shape, and the idea I had in mind was an axe that could be charged up with electricity, but the damage gets stronger the more you charge it. Kind of like the mace, but without the whole jumping to your death thing if you miss. Sticking to the steampunk theme, I made a bunch of little accent pieces that would later be textured similar to copper, and I started shaping up the head of the axe. Under the head, I made this spark plug looking thing and connected it to the handle, which is how the electricity would sort of flow into the axe. I don't know if it's just the special interest part of me, but the mechanics of an item just have to make sense, and I can only hope the mod developer thinks the same way. But once it looked good in the player's hand, I got to texturing. I always like to start texturing by giving each part of the model a base color, and then I add details from there. For the axe, I kept it pretty simple, because I wanted to give myself room to make each weapon in this video more insane than the next. And after some shading, I got to the hardest part of this model, the lightning. For this, I wanted an animated texture. Now, why is this the hardest part? Well, here's what that looked like in real time. But after painstakingly making the animation, we had the completed model, and I think it turned out pretty good. But the real question was, what did the mod dev think? And it was time to hop in game and get our rating.
So first off, the model for this weapon is very detailed, which is very nice to see. It has lots of cool designs and intricacies you can notice, such as the little dial on the side of the axe, which could indicate how much of the weapon is charged, and that seems to be connected to some sort of pipe that runs down the handle. I feel like the texture and design does fit the style of Minecraft because steampunk typically has the aesthetic of copper and leather, as well as pseudoscience technology, kind of like redstone, which is thematically very close actually. I also do like the fact that you can just straight up use it as an axe instead of a weapon, because I see a lot of modded tools that just completely forget that what could primarily be a weapon could also have other purposes instead of just being a weapon of mass destruction like this axe is. Speaking of that, the stats I feel are completely fine. It has the same stats as a netherite axe, but it deals 1 less damage, which is honestly fair considering this weapon has a charge mode that gives it the ability to rain lightning down wherever you point it. I do think though that the charge ability is a little broken because it doesn't have a duration limit, so if it were to be improved, I'd definitely make it so that you need to sort of recharge it every time you use it, and make it so that using its ability decreases its durability by a lot more than just swinging it at your enemies. My favourite part about it though is definitely the animated lightning texture. Makes it stand out quite a lot. I don't know, maybe the weapon just loves attention. I'd give this a solid 8 out of 10.
So with the axe out of the way, I went back to the wishing well to see what our next item would be. Okay, next item. Let's see what we get. Oh, we got a sword in the theme of anime with the ability of blood. That could be interesting. I don't know, I guess we'll see what I come up with here. For my next model, I started building the blade, and the idea here was some sort of katana-style sword that would be infused with the powers of blood magic, allowing for users to perform an anime-like blood slash. So after playing around with a few different hilt styles, and not really liking any of them, I gave up and moved on to the blade itself, which I was planning to make using a single plane, but that was far too time effective, so we went with a 3D shape that actually turned out really good. Once I was happy with the blade, I decided to full send the anime theme and make the most overcomplicated hilt a sword has ever seen. There have been quite literally an infinite amount of swords added to Minecraft, so to really impress the mod developer, I had to make this one as insane as possible. Moving on to texturing, I started again by laying out the base colors, and moved towards a heavy emphasis on the shiny, sharp edge of the blade. I gave the texture depth with a gradient of reds, and then finished up by adding the blood that would flow through the blade. With that done, the model was completed, and I don't know about you, but damn, this sword has aura. Now let's bring it into Minecraft and get our rating.
So immediately, as soon as you take one look at this weapon, you know it's going to be something devious. I really like the colors. It stands out and it's very in your face about it. The animated textures on this is, in my opinion, even cooler than the previous weapon. At the bottom of the weapon you can see blood dripping down from the handguard, but something about the way it's animated makes me feel as if the weapon is alive or sentient, which would be quite scary to say the least. I do think though that the weapon is a little too strong. It does 12 attack damage, which is crazy considering the fact that it has a ranged slice ability that does the full 12, and it has very little cooldown as well, you can just spam it. Stat-wise, I feel like it would be better if it does a little less damage than a netherite sword, but it has a faster attack speed considering it is a katana. I could see this kind of weapon being craftable because if you look closely, the handle of the sword has a very similar texture to nether bricks and possibly redstone. It's a very unique and interesting looking weapon, and for that reason personally, I think it doesn't quite fit the aesthetic of Minecraft as well as the previous weapon does. But that only applies to vanilla Minecraft. For a modded experience, this kind of weapon is excellent from the design and functionality, and I do think it's cooler than the steampunk axe, so for that reason I'll give this one a 9 out of 10.
So with 2 out of 3 items made, it was back to the wishing well to see what we would get for our final item. Okay, last item. Give me something good. Let's see what we get. A bow in the theme of futuristic, with the ability of cosmic. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with that. For this model, we had to go all out because I wanted the best rating I could get, the holy 10 out of 10. So instead of just a bow, the idea was a futuristic space ballista that would fire a black hole. Yeah, sure, why not? That'll be easy, right? For this model, I would have to include a player reference for scale, and you'll see with the base alone, this was going to be a massive model with lots of parts. For most of my models, I try pretty hard to make them as similar to the default Minecraft style as possible. So on something with this many components, it's highly dependent on texture to get that feeling. Kind of like how I'm highly dependent on you subscribing and maybe even commenting which of these models was your favorite. Gotcha. But as far as the ballista, I spent far too long settling on how the bolt head would look. And I decided on something that looks simple, but with texturing and particles will actually be insane. Now you remember how I said this would be easy, right? Well, I was, wrong. Basically, I made this cool little test texture on one of the cubes, and stupidly thought, huh, that looks pretty cool. Maybe I should do the whole model like this. And then I proceeded to meticulously outline every edge of the model with a different shade of gray. 3 times. But I definitely think it was worth it, because after adding this caution strip and adding an entire black hole to the head of the bolt, we had the completed model. So let's get our review from the mod dev.
Okay, this is definitely something special. So this isn't really a weapon that you hold in your hands like the previous 2 were. No, the model sort of suggests, especially with the black hole here, that this could be an actual weapon of mass destruction. It looks just phenomenal. I might be a little biased because I make nerdy ass videos on topics in Minecraft including space, but it almost looks as if this weapon was made for me. Thank you, Sneak. Definitely the coolest looking thing I've seen so far. The aesthetic vibe it gives off, I can see it kind of fitting in Minecraft. In particular, the black hole tipped massive arrow projectile thing that it fires, because we have crossbows in Minecraft, and the end dimension, if we assume that's in space, could have something in relation to the black hole. Which, if we're imagining a crafting recipe for this, could include materials from the end, maybe something in the end cities, or deep in the void, not entirely sure, but something like that. The stats I'm actually not too sure about because you spawn this with a spawn egg, so I can't really tell what stats this has, but from what I can tell, it does a lot of damage, and a lot of destructive damage as well. But my favourite thing about this by far is the black hole in the model. Now, realistically this would be quite catastrophic. If we assume the radius of this black hole's event horizon is 50 centimeters, about the width of a Minecraft block, and we use the Schwarzschild radius formula, we can calculate its mass. Turns out this tiny black hole would weigh as much as 56 Earths. That is pretty heavy for something block-sized. But yeah, overall I'd easily give this weapon a 10 out of 10.
With that, I successfully impressed the mod developer. But let me know which weapon was your favorite in the comments below.